Welcome to Force for Good and our series on the future of capitalism. I'm delighted today to introduce Glenn Gaffney. Glenn has a fantastic background, which I'm not going to attempt to actually introduce, but only tell you that it spans intelligence services, science and technology, international impact. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, Glenn.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Glenn, why don't we kick off with an introduction that you make on your very interesting background, please.
Thank you. I spent 31 years in the U.S. intelligence community, almost all of that doing science and technical analysis or tech development, developing new capabilities and being able to bring them forward into the foreign field to collect intelligence. Spent, like I said, 31 years in the U.S. intelligence community. I had the
Can you say which part of the intelligence community?
Yes, I had the great good. So I was in the CIA for almost all of those years, except for two, where I was at the office of the Director of National Intelligence as the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for collection, which had oversight over the community's collection operations.
When you say collection, just for us, would you explain what
espionage operations against gathering secrets from other countries that meant to do us harm, but also intelligence operations to work counter narcotics, counter terrorism, and any one of a number of different things. So it was both the domestic agencies and the foreign agencies that had intelligence missions. I had the great good fortune during my time at CIA to eventually serve as the Director of Science and Technology there, where I had responsibility for everything that we were doing on the science and technology front, from research all the way through development and then deployment and operations to collect intelligence, process that intelligence, use technology in the interpretation of that data or in the application of that data, as we would then give it to analysts within the CIA to do the analysis that they needed to do for the national security team.
When you left that, Glenn, you went on to look at science and technology and its impact, the positive impact in the world at large. What was that next phase of your career?
So the next phase, after I retired from the federal government, was I joined a company called Incutel, which has been around for well over 25 years now, and they are a strategic tech investor. So you can think of it as a lot of times it's referred to as CIA's venture arm, which is not quite correct, but they are a strategic investor, not for profit, that looks at ready soon technology that has both economic or the potential for strong economic impact, as well as helping in the national security front. And so Incutel identifies those technologies, brings teams together of venture players who make an investment in that technology and then bring that technology forward, oftentimes with what we would call a work program or an evolutionary step that would modify the technology in a way that in many times makes it even more fitting for the economy or more fitting for national security.
And in the most recent work you're doing, how is that somewhat different from that?
So what I'm doing now, I'm working as the Chief Strategy Officer for a new not-for-profit called the Noble Reach Foundation. And what we do there is we are not investors. We are a team that does two things. We focus on tech translation, that we think we identify tech that's still in its research phase. And while the research is still going on, we bring teams of experts in, former CEOs, folks who have been through the valley of death in translating research into technology, into product. We bring embedded experts in who have different experiences in key technical areas like biotech or in lasers or in AI, right, machine learning. We'll find the right experts, bring them in, work with the research team, and put them on a path towards commercialization. But the technologies that we identify aren't just for the economy. We're also looking at ones that we think could have real social impact, right, yes, and an impact for good. And so on the tech translation side of the house, that's what our focus is, and we're enjoying working with these teams and bringing them forward. And we've been successful with it in the last few years, which has been very gratifying. The other half of what we do as Noble Reach is the talent side. We serve as Noble Reach as a bridge between government, industry, and academia. And if you think about it from the tech translation side, government's funding research. They're funding us to come in and work with the research teams. Most of those are academic research teams. right? And then we're bringing that forward and connecting them in with industry. On the talent side, we're still acting as that bridge between those three. And we have a vision of creating a new cadre or a new interest in government service, in helping students, graduates, right, see the value and see their careers and see what they can do in their career that actually is mission oriented and helps move, right, some of these key missions forward, for the country and for our allies. And so we have a vision of, we talk about it going from why to wow, talking to students and talking with folks about, potential career or potential service time with the government, which for many, that's why would I do that? But what we want to do is give them experiences through internships, scholarships, fellowships, where they realize how important this work is, how meaningful it can be, and that they can serve with their skills in the government or in industry or in academia in a unified, integrated way to actually solve some of the toughest problems, right, that are facing the nation.
That's fascinating. I'm delighted you were actually on our panel. We're at CES. We launched our Technology as a Force for Good report, which talks about the future of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, you've read the report, we identified 19 technologies that we think are core that will propel the future, which are competed for by the top 100 technology companies in the world, but also by governments who realize that, of course, technology is the foundation of power. And in the transition from the industrial era to the information era, there is a race going on, not just to create all the wealth from technology, but to use it as a basis of power in whatever the next civilization is. And I was delighted you joined us on that panel. Your thoughts as you looked at the report, was there something that struck you in terms of what the report was trying to achieve in terms of the messaging based on your background and what we're doing here?
Well, I think, first of all, I think the report was excellent. So congratulations on that. There's nothing that I could say that would improve on the report. So, so I think it really, I think, hit all the right notes and the right balance. I think where it resonates the most with me is when we start looking at some of the real challenges that I think are going to fundamentally change the way we think and live and operate on the planet. So when we look at some of these technologies, one of the big things that I think is most concerning is the fact that the climate is changing, and that the impact that that's going to have in areas like food security are incredibly important, because the whole planet's going to shift in terms of what does it mean to feed the planet while the population grows. And then geographically the bread belts, right, shift, and so we have to come up with better solutions, right, new solutions in in agriculture, right, in ways of producing food and making it accessible, right, across the planet. Huge issue, huge geopolitical consequence if we don't address these challenges relative to poverty and mass migration. As one example.
That's great, because this is obviously a taster for a much deeper dialogue. We could go for hours.
Yes,
with a limited
absolutely.
time. And I wanted to say, Force for Good has this tagline where we say the purpose is to create a more sustainable, secure, superior future, of which technology provides a lot of the fuel, of course. But that's the purpose of capitalism, really, when it really works. The food issue and the biotech issue that goes with it. How do you see it playing out in terms of creating something which is sustainable as a food source for the fact we're transitioning from 8 billion people to 10 billion by 2050? And climate change at the same time,
absolutely,
which is making this huge impact.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very excited about what's happening in the biotech space and what I'm seeing in the research fields in terms of biotech for new products, new materials, what that means in terms of lowering the carbon footprint relative to the production of those materials. And so it helps on that side, but also in new methods of developing proteins and growing protein and new techniques in growing food and increasing crop yield and resilience for the seed, resilience for the crops, Um, Extremely important in those areas, as well as biotech and its applications in healthcare and the future of health, to include, right, the integration with the internet and the Internet of Things. So we start talking about telehealth and telemedicine, start talking about personalized medicine, when we're beginning to understand at the information science level all the different all the different things are going into health and how we monitor that, how we actually can begin to do predictive health, right? And look at it over a lifetime.
And Glenn, there's this, as you've described, there's this rise in our capability to deliver food. At the same time, the climate change specialists, and I interviewed the head of the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, at COP28, and he was telling us how the weather patterns and the climate issue means that probably where we grow food today will have to migrate, will
Absolutely.
naturally migrate, because the weather will destroy our food baskets.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have to appear elsewhere. Do you see this as a massive food security issue for us?
Yes,
And something
absolutely.
that we are awake to tackling yet, or we haven't gripped it yet?
I think we are waking to it. I think the technical community has taken it on a little bit more aggressively than others in this space. I think there's real opportunity here, but just like I think in any of the areas that you identified in the report, none of us are going to be able to solve these problems, these global problems, on our own. It's going to take an integrated effort of not just government, industry, and academia working together, but across multiple governments, across multiple countries, coming together and working in an integrated fashion to deliver a whole different level of result. We have to load share, right, some of this work, because the amount of work that has to be done in these areas to provide that, I think, very achievable future
Yes.
Is so vast, right, that it has to be a shared burden. And we have to actually trust each other, right, to carry different aspects of that burden together.
Wow. You've highlighted an enormous list to us, of course. Now, move from our sustainability theme to security. You spent so much of your life in security. You understand it's multifaceted. And the CES theme here, of course, is human security for all, which the United Nations and the World Academy of Art and Science have positioned here with CTA as the theme. What are the biggest threats in security as you look ahead that are already emergent now, that are only going to grow?
So I think one of the key things that I think has to happen, right, across the world is we need to increase the accessibility of the internet, right, Internet of Things, information science. Technology is the thing that will address most of these challenges, if not all of these challenges. And there's no future economy that's not a technical economy, right?
Yes.
Technology is going to touch all of it. And so if we want to actually improve the status, right, across the world, we have to address those issues. And so whether we're talking about infrastructure that is the internet and the use of the internet, and how data science and the data economy develops across the planet. If we think about the infrastructure that's necessary for the biotech and the evolution of biotech and all the areas that we were just talking about, it's going to require an infrastructure in order to do that. And securing that infrastructure then becomes a critical piece of this. And so so one of the things that concerns me is both concerns me and I see opportunity. And so the concern is that we must do a better job of not just securing the infrastructure, but securing the data,
Yes.
right? Protecting that data, but protecting it in a way that allows us to actually put it into use. And so it's not just protecting it by holding it all back, it's protecting it while it's actually in use. And that presents its own risks associated with it. So there's a real responsibility here in developing the kind of cybersecurity that's going to be necessary to secure these infrastructures, because we're all going to be dependent on it and dependent on each other. But here's the opportunity, because for a lot of these countries that currently don't have that access, don't have that infrastructure, it allows us to now build that infrastructure in a way where we can think about cybersecurity as a design principle and design the security that's necessary instead of trying to bolt it on afterwards the way that we've done so much of our own industry. And so much of the way cyber security develops today across many nations is that it evolves based on the sunk costs that have already happened in the last 10 years or 20 years. We don't have to make all those same mistakes and all those bolt-on pieces if we're helping others develop this. And giving ourselves a clean slate from a design perspective then enables us to look at here's the as-is state, here's what the to-be state can actually look like. Now what's the transformation matrix to go from here to here, right? And that's where I think that I get excited about the opportunity there. And by the way, the same goes for the future of the energy networks, right? And our networks for energy. There's so many great energy solutions coming, right? And the distribution networks are a challenge, right? They're a challenge today because proving that you can do this at scale in distribution is one of the big gaps. But we have to work on closing that gap together. And it's critical because so many of the bio solutions that we see in things like agriculture, right, and as well as many others, the single biggest limiter to actually moving those solutions into mass production is the energy consumption, right, associated with it. And so we need to bring the cost of that energy, right, solutions down, right, spread and be able to distribute it in a way that it can be used effectively across the board. And so securing that infrastructure, right, is also a critical aspect of security for all.
You spoke about this trust requirement, though, for us to tackle the issues of the planet, the common issues that we have. It doesn't sound like we have that right now. We're breaking down trust, it seems. If you look at the important votes on conflicts right now in the world, there are a few countries on one side and many on the other, and we're splitting on important issues. Do you see something like cybersecurity as a way to pull us together so we agree the standards and agree the code of conduct, or something that will actually divide us even further because it's a weapon?
I think it divides us. I think it divides us even further if we keep thinking in terms of market, right, and trade, right, and transactional interactions, right. Free markets are great. I love free markets, and we've let the market develop things, right, and I'm confident that the market left to its own will develop the things that need to be developed over time, and I'm very encouraged by that. What I'm concerned about is that there's not enough time, right, to let that happen. We need to actually accelerate that process. And so in my experience in working with other countries technically from the national security side, because none of us do any of this alone, right? We have great allies and great partners around the world who have come together, right, when it's absolutely necessary, focused on a mission, right, and building that trust by doing something important, mission-oriented together. Sure, mistakes get made, right? But you develop that relationship and you develop that trust, right? And it's a phone call that says, "Oh, I'm sorry," right? We missed that. You pick it up and you keep going, right? And so if we keep treating economic security, trade, national security, our interest, your interest, as merely bilateral or even multilateral transactions, and don't focus on what are the real things that are going to change the nature of the way we live on the planet, right, then I think we're going to continue to fight this trust battle.
That's
right?
a really good message.
Right.
It's a really good message.
If we come together
Yes.
on these things that are so important, and we recognize the need to burden share, right? Yes, supply chain issues. We've all realized that there's real supply chain issues, right, across the planet, and COVID made that abundantly clear. We need to address those things. But trying to bring it all inside and doing it all vertically within any one country, right, is not going to enable us to get to where we need to go. So we've got to build that trust level and actually accept a certain level of strategic interdependence, right, to solve these problems.
Interesting, because Glenn, the third theme we have is this superior future. And I think what you're outlining is if we work together, we get to create a superior future.
Absolutely.
And that superior future has lots of legs, as you've just described some of those. And one of the core ones we highlight in our work is AI. And we imagine that actually just existing technologies and existing levels of AI and some of the developments that we see happening incrementally can solve 50% of the UN Sustainable Development Goal gap, and fill that gap, nearly 50%. And I'm sure that's actually underestimated based on the sort of progress we're making. So for this superior future, AI seems critical. How do you see the role of AI?
So I think AI is critical. I think the report's dead on target with that. Because I really think the opportunity to use machines to handle the kind of complexity that is out there that makes some of these tasks daunting and incredibly time consuming at best, right, for humans. AI as that assistant, right, I think is a critical step for us going forward, and increasingly, right, being able to develop and trust levels of autonomy, right, to do the things that humans cannot do very well, right. So I come back to cybersecurity as an example there. The sheer it's an area where I feel like we need to let machines do what machines do best, which is interpret the communications machine to machine and understand what's in band or what's out of band in terms of what's secure, what's not secure, what needs to be addressed and what not. And today the next step is helping humans interpret and be able to act quickly and effectively given an incredible level of complexity. But as decision support, but as that complexity grows, increasing levels of autonomy. Now, some of the key questions that we have to answer, right, get into our understanding of what happens when you have a human being and a machine working, right, together. Because what happens is you end up with a new system, right? You create a systems issue, right, where the human can do everything exactly right, right? And the autonomous agent can do everything exactly right, and you still get the wrong outcome.
Give an example.
And so an example of that might be an autonomous vehicle, right? It could be a plane, could be a car, could be one of a number of things. And you've developed the program to actually develop. It has sensors, right? It's collecting data. It's evaluating its environment and the input that it's getting all the time, and it is making a set of decisions based on the way it has learned, right? To both interpret and achieve the task, right? Fly the plane, drive the car, drive the ship, whatever it might be. What happens so many times for a human who is in that loop necessarily is that they are interacting based on their learning and their instinct. But what we fail to realize many times is that the machine is interpreting that input as just more data. And so a human may feel like they're taking control, right? But unless there's a recognition of a human in the loop and that human has authority, right, then all you're doing is you're not directing the machine, you're negotiating with the machine at that point.
That's a big difference.
Big difference.
It's no longer decision support. You're now negotiating with the machine.
You're negotiating with the machine. And so we actually need to develop a sense of what are the emergent behaviors, right, as humans interact with machines to accomplish tasks in very, very complex tasks in very creative ways. And begin to understand the consequences of some of the emergent behavior, the things that happen as a result of that new system that we can't readily explain. And so I really believe that just like we talked about the nations needing to come together,
sure,
right, to work on these key solutions, I believe the nations need to come together and develop what myself and some colleagues have referred to as proving grounds, where we begin to test AI, right, in specific application areas. And we run these series of proving ground tests, both as technical experiments and social science experiments, where the public, right, is actually engaged and seeing the results, seeing the work that's going on. You can't test every possible outcome. It is not possible to do that. But you can make an effort, right, in looking at what are the levels of acceptability of a way a system performs and the impact that it has on the people that it serves. And the customer here, the consumer here, is not just the person who's paying for the application, right? It's everyone who's affected by the decision, right, that is made by that system.
So if I understand this well, AI is a tool to help educate, help farmers to get better productivity, for us to learn a new task, to do our work better in our workplace. All of that is fine. That's a tool that can be trained, that can potentially help you. But as you get to physical consequences of your actions, if the tool is autonomous and it's rule-based and autonomous, it doesn't understand intent.
Right.
So potentially it's gone out of your control, and it may give you outcomes that are potentially dangerous.
That's right.
And those can be dangerous for many things. They can be dangerous for other systems. They can be dangerous for defense. They can be dangerous for trade systems, financial systems, so on. What is the answer, though? How do you still work with the tool, given that this is a distributed tool now, across the planet, and programmers are developing everywhere in the world? How do we align so that we have this tool be a partner, not something we negotiate and lose the negotiation on?
Right. And so I think, again, I think there's real hope here, right? In that one of the things that I've learned and that I've seen, right, working in this space, is that when you train the human and the machine together, right, as a team from the beginning, right, you actually develop that system with a different level of insight, right, about the way that it works and the way that it behaves. And so there's some retraining that may have to be involved on the human's part, right? But that training can be done, right, in tandem, in cooperation with that AI partner, right? Number one. Number two, you can look at, right, any one of a number of series of consequences, of outputs. What is the consequence of these, some of these actions, and determine what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, right, in this space at this time, right? And so, I'll go back to cybersecurity for a minute. I think people will readily, understand that it's a very complex problem. It's getting more complex by the day, and AI should be increasingly applied in that space. And everyone's comfortable, right, with that notion as an assistant in that space. And increasingly, we will want to give the system more autonomy, right, to prevent events that are happening faster than a human can react. But what happens when a tool, a autonomous agent, decides that it has a responsibility to shut down attack that it sees mounting, and does it by taking out another country's infrastructure that's being used as a transport vehicle for that attack, right? An undesirable, unwanted, right, consequence with significant geopolitical, right, outcome. And so we have to actually think through some of these questions and think through the way that we test and develop AI systems. I think there's a fundamental question that we need to actually ask in almost every AI endeavor, which is, should we treat the machine as if it's fundamentally right, or should we treat it as it's fundamentally wrong? And the way that we approach testing, the way that we approach development, has a lot to do with the way that we think about the machine, right, and the machine's employment in these things going forward. This is why these proving grounds, I think, are so important. And it's important to do it in a transparent way so that the public sees, right, what's happening, and the way that government, industry, and academia are, again, working together in an integrated way to develop a better future.
Yes. Your message is really clear. These are very complex technologies now, and if we work together, we have a chance of actually developing a far better world. But the risks are clear already in terms of where this goes. Is that right?
It is, and I don't see another way forward.
We have to work together.
We have to do it. We have to do it that way. No matter how many ways I cut it, no matter how many ways I look at it and think about it, and I think about, we have incredible research in this country. Our allies have incredible research capability. We have some of the best financial instruments in the world. We cannot do this by ourselves. And so it only gets solved, right, in the time frame that we need it to be solved.
Yes.
Right? I call this democratic principles of digital design, right? Which are inefficient by definition because it's democratic, right? But we have to actually learn what that means, right? And what does that mean, right, in principle, as we're developing these machines.
Yes.
Another thought that I had on the development of machine learning, right? One of the things, another thing that I've called for in some other talks and papers that I've written is the idea of using AI to watch AI, yes. Right? To develop a program that has a rule set that says these are the bounds in which this program should be able to make decisions. Yes. Right? This algorithm should be able to make decisions. And so if it's drifting, right, or if the questions are being asked that are out of the bounds of what we believe are the decision space that we've allowed in this, right, then there's an autonomous agent that's actually watching that, right, and putting the flag up and alerting the human this one's right, not in a good space. Yes. Part of our understanding and development, I think, comes from developing recommenders, right? Developing algorithms that become recommenders so that they can help us with our decisions, right? Things like, how do I get through these, 800 pages of regulation? What really matters to me relative to this piece, sure. Right? Or sure. How should I think about this over-the-counter medication with all the other medications that I'm yes. taking, right? Yes. So having a recommender, yes. right, that helps you navigate complex decisions is a way that we begin to build, right, trust. Lastly, I think there's a big piece in our education system. The way that we've been developing talent, the way that we've been teaching talent has really been geared to the industrial revolution and the evolution, right, yes. within that industrial age. We need to actually revise the way that we're training the next gen workforce, and begin to actually teach them what does it mean to actually pair and partner with machines, right, early, right, and throughout their career. Not just from the machine part, but also from the being able to understand that we're going from a data economy to a knowledge economy, which is not so much about having all the data, but it's about asking the right question. Yes. And it's about knowing what questions you should ask when the answer comes back, yes. to actually have whether you're going to have confidence or any kind of certainty, yes. right, in that answer. And so it's a skill set that needs to be developed around the application and use of machine learning. And we need to start it now.
Glenn, without being optimistic or pessimistic, just trying to be realistic about this. A lot of people have come out recently and said the UN Sustainable Development Goals are not achievable. Our work suggested they are completely achievable. We have the technology. Existing technologies deployed at scale globally can achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, the rate of progress tells us, and you talked about energy, and I'd love you to talk about a game changer such as fusion, what mm-hmm. it means for us. But the range of technologies and the rate at which we're developing this makes us believe that actually, post-2030, not can we only achieve the SDGs, we can substantially exceed them. And we will do, because that is the leap of civilizations we're making Absolutely. In a knowledge-based information economy. What do you think?
So, yes, I think the technologies are there. I think and I think, we're working on those last few pieces associated with each of those technologies in these areas. It's why an integrative effort is necessary, right? But you had asked about fusion. One of the things that I'm really excited about is just how far along we've come, right, in understanding fusion and what it actually takes to generate, right, clean, always available, right, energy. And as I've talked to some of the different companies around the planet who are working in the fusion area, one of the things that excites me is that it's moved from the domain of just physicists in a lab trying to prove a particular point to the point where they actually have needed to hire more and more engineers. And so we're seeing the leading edge of this transition from a physics problem to an engineering problem. Yes. Right? Now, I don't want to want to oversell this point,
Yes.
right? Because the reality is that the physicists are going to make the engineers better, and the engineers are going to make the physicists better. And there may be some things that we discover about physics as a result of the next few steps that have to get taken.
Sure.
But what's exciting to me is that the engineers and the physicists are now working together, so we have the opportunity to discover those things
Yes.
and take on those challenges and take the next step.
Yes.
And to me, that's what's so exciting about some of these new energy solutions, fusion being one of them.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm delighted we could talk. I know we've come to the end of our conversation for this time, but thank you very much for doing this with us.
It's my pleasure.
And look, I just want to say that we've had an opportunity to speak to a man who has been, if you watch Bond films, he's been Q, but for America. And it's delightful that actually we get a chance to hear some of the thoughts on how we create a more sustainable, secure, and superior future. Thank you. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.